Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel and to this series where I'm building the Gwillows Chipmunk. It's going to be rubber powered, no RC conversion this time because it's too small for that. I'm afraid I couldn't wait for myself and start to record, so I already started to build. Here's the basis of the fuselage. It's built up with the two side fuselage sides and then a lot of the formers that come already die cut, not completely cut but die cut, so I need to go with a knife around. Then each of the formers, I hope you can see it, I have to put onto this template and then mark where I have to make the holes for then the longer ones that will go in. It's actually quite a smart way. You just put it on it, you have the lines, you mark it, and then with a knife and with I use a needle nose file, or this one actually, a flat one, this one, and then I make the cuts. Also some strengthening on the formers. I don't know if you can see it, but it's also recommending some strengthening on the formers. For me, the only worry here is that then it's going to probably interfere with the rubber motor, so I'm not sure if then eventually I might need to cut them out. But for the building at least, I think it does give some strength. Now the concern here is that it needs to be completely straight, and it isn't completely straight. I think one of the balsa sheets is a bit softer. This one that you see here, it's softer, and this one is a bit stiffer, so it's not completely straight. I've tried to wet it here a little bit, so let's see if it expands overnight a little bit and then bends in a little bit, because it's not so easy to keep it completely straight, and that is a bit of the challenge. I somehow can't imagine myself, maybe with 15 years of age, trying to do this with this precision. I'm struggling even with this, but that's part of the fun, right, that we test ourselves. If you see, if I close this in, then one folds in and the other one doesn't, so I might need to put in a little bit more water here so that it expands and curves in on its own. But anyhow, it's already coming along as a structure, which is nice. Another point also that I'm not sure if it's of interest or not, so far I've been using this glue. This is like Kavan, I think it's a German brand. The first bottle I had of this was really good. I used it and it was really good. And this one has got all lumpy. You can't really see it, but the glue is all lumpy in there. So eventually I open it up here and I take glue out, but as you might see, it's lumpy. It's not liquid or pasty at all. So I'm a bit disappointed about that one. I still use it because it's a nice consistency. It's rubbery. So I'm hoping that if I put it on the joints, then it will give a little bit of movement. I've been looking for other white glues. I got this one. This one is very liquid, and when it dries it's very stiff, so I'm not using it at all. I don't know what I'll use it for. And then I got also this one. This was in a cheap, I think the dollar store or something equivalent, and I've used this one. Again, it's very liquid, so I have used it actually on this. It takes longer to dry as it's very liquid, but it does seem to make the joints good. So the only problem is that I think it's more brittle. When it dries, it's more brittle than this one. So it's the only worry there. I could use also, and I do use sometimes, the super glue, which I don't like. I have the little tubes of super glue. They last for a while and then they dry up, or then I get my fingers stuck. But anyhow, I also use that sometimes. But I think I'm going to have to buy another one of these and hope for the best, that it's in better shape than this one and that it lasts longer. So that's about the glue, and I don't want to use too much of it because it adds weight, but on the other hand I do need glue to keep it together, right? So let's see how that goes. In any case, I'll continue with this and probably the fuselage, and at some point I'll also start with the wings, which is all the balsa wood building, which is the fun part. I've got to admit that is probably the part that I enjoy the most. So here I am doing the very enjoyable part of putting the fuselage together. It is a little bit crooked, maybe you can't see it but I can, which is annoying, but I did try to straighten it as much as I could. I've started already to put the stringers, or the longerons, onto the fuselage, but I've decided not to put on the bottom yet, because I think if I put it in, it's going to be very difficult to thread the motor in. So probably one of the next steps is going to be to put the rubber motor in, or at least put it in, or maybe build around it more than just try to thread it in afterwards, which is very important also, the order of the things that one does, right? One thing that I annoy myself with is that when I was building it, or before I built it, I was thinking I have to put the dashboards, I don't know if you can see them here, before building it. And of course I forgot, I built it, and then I realized I have to put in the dashboards at some point, so they're a little bit messy. I did manage to put them in. I did find that they didn't stick. It's decals, right? You have to cut them out, put them in water, and then they should stick to whatever they touch, but it didn't stick very well. Maybe I did something wrong. So what I did on the second one, I just actually cut it out and glued it with normal glue for paper, and I think it looks better. It's tidier, not so damaged, and I think weight doesn't really matter. So lessons learned is to think before one acts, and I always go and rush and do the building part, which I like, and I forget those details. What else here? I've put in also the tail, the little bit of let's say the tail cone, I think it's called. And what I'll probably be doing now, as I say, is designing somehow the motor, see how I put it in, and before I close up the fuselage. So let me do that, and hopefully I come back to you with maybe a complete fuselage even. And here's an update on the Chipmunk and the fuselage. As I was mentioning, the order is important, so I've built up the rubber motor. Now I always struggle with the rubber motors because I never understand the numbers and the instructions. The plans do say that a 36-inch loop or double loop is the best of this size of rubber, so I've done it. So I'm not going to use the original one that comes in the box because I did have some rubber, which is good. I then tried to be like the pros, and I wanted to lubricate the rubber. I don't have lubricant, so I used WD-40, which might not have been a good idea because I have these small rubber bands on the ends, and I put it into a little plastic bag, a zip bag, and then actually the WD-40 dissolved those little rubber bands. So I have no idea what damage it could have done to the rest of the rubber. It seems to be okay, but maybe it wasn't a smart idea of mine. So I might need to get the real rubber lubricant, which I'm not sure even where to try to get it. Now the motor is there, somehow built, and a little bit, so I've braided it a little bit by hand so that it hopefully doesn't hang too low in the fuselage and hit against sides. And then what I've also done, let's see if you can see this, I've prepared the little tube. This is a aluminium tube, and the plan is to put this on the back. I've made a couple of holes in the back also, so I'll be threading this. I'll cut this down to size, and then the rubber motor will go on this. Now this is not in the plans at all. I just see it from people like Cliff and others that do it, so I try to be like them. And then the step now is actually to cut this rod. It's a copper rod with a hole that actually I can then, if I have a stooge, I can then hold the rubber band back to wind the motor if it ever gets to that. So now what I'll try to put is the motor in place, and then try to thread it through the fuselage, stick it out through the nose, through that little hole, and then see also for the cowling arrangements, basically to have the motor in place before I close it with the stringers of the bottom, because if not, with the stringers in the bottom it would be very, very cumbersome. Like maybe with tweezers and things I would manage, but it would be really quite cumbersome to get. So that's where I am now. Let's see how it goes. So time to wrap up the chapter on building of the fuselage. As usual, I can't remember what I've shared already, but just a bit of an update. I've put in the wire for the landing gear, for the tail wheel. I don't know if there's a wheel in the kit, or I'll have to make it. I'm not sure, I haven't seen it, I haven't looked for it either. And I think that the major thing is that I've put on the tissue. I still have not shrunk it, and with the tissue I do find that what I've learned is that it's good to alternate, not just do all the tissue at the same time, because I do like building the wood. That's why I decided to put the tissue already now before I go on with the rest of the structure. So that is the tissue. And the challenge with the tissue is that for sure one needs a sharp blade. I haven't always done it, and it creates problems. And if one thinks, or sometimes I think that it's going to cover up the mistakes that I've done before, it's actually the opposite, right? So the tissue, once the tissue goes on, you can actually see the mistakes even more. So the next step on the tissue will be to put the water and glue on it. Then it will hopefully look a bit shinier, and it will get a bit taut, so it'll look better, I hope. And the other thing is also I've put on the nose block. A mistake that I have done is that I cut all the stringers flush to the front bulkhead, and that's probably a mistake. I have a feeling I've done that mistake before, but I seem to not learn, because now the nose cone or the cowling is actually loose, so I have to figure out how to fix it. Maybe I have to glue on some wood or something to make sure that it stays in place, and basically to be able to use it. It's also good that I can take it out, because that's maybe a spot where I can potentially put in some weight to balance it once the whole structure is put together. Let me wind it up briefly and make sure that it somehow turns. I think it does. And in any case, that's it. It's gone crooked, so I need to really fix it. That's it for this part of the fuselage. Thank you for following along, and I'll see you next time.